Make sure you check out our online store where we work with our graphic designer to create stunning garment and product designs that feature a wide variety of aircraft types such as British fighters, World War II aircraft, American bombers, Russian fighters, and much more. You can pick your favourite designs and personalise any items within our Redbubble store that range from clothing right the way through to stationery. All of our designs feature our logo, so you can show your support for the channel while getting a quality product. You can head to our website aircrewinterview.tv and click store, or go to redbubble.com/people/AC interview. Thank you and enjoy.
You mentioned you went to the weapons school earlier, so tell us about that and how you got into that program.
Well, that's an interesting story. The weapons school, just to give you a little preface, is the Air Force Weapons School. It's not the Top Gun, not the movie version, but the Air Force Weapons School is probably the top and most challenging training program, aviation training program in the world. It's also the most prestigious. If you come out the other end of it, you are afforded a certain amount of respect because you have been there, and you always wear a patch that shows you've been there. Most everyone wants to go. There are some people who don't want to put in the effort, but most everyone wants to go. And I was an instructor pilot, an F-4 instructor pilot at Homestead near Miami in Florida. And at the time, they came out, as they did, about every 6 months they'd come out and they'd say, we have 6 slots in the next weapons school class. So my boss says, my squadron commander Dick Fisher and my operations officer Duke Terry decided they'd push me for this job, which I was most grateful for. And the way it worked out, it's kind of a funny story, but there were 2 of us in the wing. Another guy, a little younger than I was, who was also he was a very talented guy, but we were kind of competing for this.
Right.
And the way this came out was, my boss and my ops officer and his boss and his ops officer, he's a different squadron, went to the wing commander's office and they sat down with a case of beer, and they all talked about Steve's advantages, why Steve ought to go and why Bill or Bob or Fred or whoever it was ought to go. And this went on for most of the day, fueled by the beer. While we sat around and wondered who was going to get the nod. Well, I got the nod. I got a call that night from Duke, and I kind of blustered over the phone because I couldn't think of anything to say, but man, was I happy. So I went in the next day and I cornered the 2 of them and I said, thanks so much for pushing me. I do appreciate it. I said, which of my many talents won me the job? And Dick Fisher laughed at me. He said, "You're old." And I said, "I'm old? I haven't hit 30 yet." He said, "Well," he said, "it's relative. And what happens is, to get into the weapons school, there was a cutoff date, so many years as a rated pilot. I was rapidly approaching that point, 7 years rated. And the other guy was a couple years behind me. And he said, I managed to sell the wing commander on the fact that you needed to do this right now. He could do it later."
Wow.
Boom.
You were in.
Take it the way I can get it.
So it must have been a lot of hard work, though.
It was, yeah. The weapons school was the toughest 6 months of my life. Mm-hmm. And, but tough, I say yes, but rewarding also. Mm-hmm. And the academic program, once again, we got a little bit of it when we went to replacement training union. We went into the nuts and bolts of it and very, very deep into the weapons and tactics at the weapons school. 6 months, half a day of academics, half a day of flying, and it was unrelenting. It never backed off, never eased off. You never got much time to take a deep breath and enjoy it.
So heads in the books all the time.
Heads in the books, or in the cockpit. And the flying, albeit the best flying in the world, training flying, I think, at Nellis out of Las Vegas and northern Nevada. The flying was just as difficult, and the stress level was just as high. Mm-hmm. Now, I alluded to the one instance out there that I consider probably the peak of my training career. We had been in academics looking at Soviet equipment, Soviet aircraft, MiG-21s, MiG-17s, 19s, that kind of thing, in depth. What do they do? What are they good at? What are they bad at? What are their strengths and weaknesses, and so on and so forth. And you know, it was a good academic program. Well, the boss called us all in. The class called us all in on one late Thursday afternoon, I think it was. We were all bitching and moaning because we'd had a long day and we wanted to go out and have a beer.
Yeah.
And nevertheless, we sat down in the auditorium. And this guy, he was the operations officer of the weapons school. He got up on the stage. Major Larry Keith was his name. And he had a picture behind him of a MiG-21, MiG-17. And he said, gentlemen, he said, for the past week, you've been studying the capabilities of these aircraft. You've been involved in what they do and how they do it and how well they do it. And we're all sitting there saying, oh, yeah, okay, come on, we'd like a beer. It's nice time to go to the bar. Yeah, one of those. And he paused a little bit and he said, starting tomorrow, you will fly against these airplanes.
That must have been a shock.
It was a shock. Jaws hit the floor, the bitching ceased, because none of us had any idea how this could come about, why it was coming about, what the deal was. It turned out that our class, thanks to the efforts of Major Keith and those guys, our class was included in a Department of Defense program called Have Idea. And the Have Idea program was the exploitation of Soviet aircraft. It started out with MiG-21, MiG-17, moved on to 23s later on, and the classification level was open your mouth,
yeah,
you're out of here, you know, that kind of thing. It was declassified, I hastily point out, in 2006, so I can talk about it now. But in essence, what it was an opportunity for us during our tactical training to fly DACM against MiG-21s, MiG-17s, and glean all the information that you could out of that kind of activity. And we started right off with it. It was great. We would go out, we would brief a mission up to the tactical ranges up north of Las Vegas. We'd head on up there, and at some point, one of them would jump us, or two of them would jump us. And we just tie it up. Standard Nellis rules, you could do pretty much whatever you needed to do in the air, and we had some great missions against the MiGs. We thought about this, of course. We didn't have a chance to, we briefed them, but we briefed them over the phone, and we wondered who were flying these things.
Yeah, that's
who
a
were
good
flying
point.
these airplanes. And it turned out that they were all Air Force, Navy, Marine fighter pilots that had been secretly recruited. They came to Nellis every morning. Every morning they'd climb on a 727 that took off to the north and went up to the famous Area 51. And it landed there, and all these guys would get out and they'd do their day job flying MiGs. Then in the evening, they'd climb back on the 727, come back to Las Vegas and go home, where they couldn't talk to their wives about what they were doing. They couldn't say anything to anybody, but it was the best kept secret I ever saw in the Air Force. I never, ever saw a word of it slip out. But the training evolved into, we had it the best. We didn't have any sortie limitations. We flew as many as we could during that period of time when they were there. I had 5 or 6, I think, against the MiGs. But the training program evolved into a follow-on program called Constant Peg, where almost all the fighter pilots, well, an awful lot of them anyway, would get one sortie against a MiG at some point in the career, a chance to look at them. Mm-hmm. But we were part of the program. We had the best of it. It was the pinnacle of my time in the weapons school, no doubt about it.
And before we wrap up this Phantom part of your interview, how did the actual Phantom fare against the MiGs?
As we learned, it fared better, and this bore itself out. It was borne out in Southeast Asia, because right at first, when we were going north and the MiGs were up, they were kicking our butts pretty good. And that's because, as I mentioned before, basic training, we didn't have any dissimilar. We were all F4 against F4. We were used to an airplane that performed the same way ours did. But the first guys to go up, early guys to go up against the MiGs, discovered that they turned better. They did a lot of things that the Phantom was not taking advantage of because we hadn't trained for it.
Yeah.
The dissimilar idea that came out of this, and that also went with the MiGs, is the fact we started realizing that you used your power and your vertical maneuvering, and you could beat this guy, and you could beat him badly. And we started doing that during the latter parts of the war because we had been trained to do that. Our pilots had been trained, and dare I say it, our pilots were better.
Of course.
Of course.
So how many hours did you get on the Phantom, Steve?
I got 2,200 hours on the Phantom in 12 years.
Wow.
And you know, the airline pilots watching this will say, it's not very much. But when you think about it, at about an hour a time, average,
Pretty impressive.
that's a lot of flying.